Kono bangumi wa goren no sponsor no teikyo de okure shimasu. Yeah.
Oh.
Tell me, do any of these phrases mean anything to you? Star Platinum, Hierophant Green, Hermitu Purple. If you answered no to any of the above, then strap yourself in as we step into the crazy world of JoJo no Kimyo na Boken, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. This long-running manga series was created, written, penned by Hirohiko Araki, and is by far his most famous work. The manga is split into 8 parts, and each part couldn't be any more different than the rest. During its existence, several video games based on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure were released. We'll take a brief look at the 2 games released in the 90s on this episode. Both of them are based on Stardust Crusaders, a quite often used source of inspiration. This is the part of JoJo that introduces one of the most popular characters, Jotaro Kujo. I'll just give you a brief overview of what Stardust Crusaders is about. Consider it a bromance featuring 5 burly, muscled men on a road, sea and air trip around the world in 30 days. The characters have these spiritual extensions of themselves, called stands, that fight for them and protect them from danger. The story focuses on main character Jotaro, his grandfather Joseph, and his comrades Kakyoin, Avdol, and Polnareff. They're on a journey to save Jotaro's mother from a stand that is figuratively tearing her apart. The solution to the problem: defeat the legendary vampire Dio, who has once again risen from the dead. But the road to Dio isn't easy. The Super Famicom title, simply named JoJo no Kimyo na Boken, was developed by Winkysoft and published by Cobra Team. If you don't know who either of those are, I don't blame you. Most of Winkysoft's games stayed in Japan except for maybe Dr. Lautrec? Let's not bother with the specifics. This JoJo game focuses on the whole story of Stardust Crusaders, with some artistic license regarding the plot. Bosses are sometimes fought in a different order or in mixed up locations, so I treat the game as an alternate universe kind of deal. It's a JRPG with a unique overworld map, existing entirely in 2D side-on scenes in a permanent letterbox mode. This makes navigation a pain in the ass. You start with only Jotaro, but end up with the whole Stardust Crusaders team, which is pretty cool. Battles are fought in a strange style of combat, where a user's biorhythm and heartbeat affects the order of their turns and what commands they can perform. Sometimes you need to check the enemy for weak spots before you can deal any sort of damage to them. In some cases, you can't even damage a boss until you possess a specific item. If the character who needs to come up with the boss strategy is knocked out, then you can't win. This gives the game a high level of difficulty, and sometimes it just feels like luck is completely against you. Characters have hit points and I guess mental points? You can defeat enemies by whittling down their health, or you can talk them out of fighting by belittling them until they lose the actual will to fight. It's a neat idea, somewhat lacking in its execution, seeing as enemies can do the same to you. Also, most bosses aren't affected by your words from the get-go, but you can raise your persuasion so high that you can even talk Dio out of his plans of world domination. Yes, the legendary vampire himself can be bullied into submission. Amazing. This game is extremely crippled. All copies went to print with a bug that makes the status display screen crash the console. So if you wanted a detailed reading of biorhythms, status effects and other important information, you run the risk of completely crashing the Super Famicom simply by asking for it. Definitely check this one out if you like a good JRPG, especially the fan translation that converts the text to English. However, I highly recommend playing on emulator or clone console, where you can save scum your way through Dio and his ludicrous 1500 HP. And while you're at it, you can save state before checking the status screen to avoid any unfortunate crashes. As for the second game released in the 90s, it hit the arcades in two flavors: the vanilla JoJo no Kimyo na Boken from 98, and the later re-release with the subtitle Miraihi no Isan, translated as Heritage for the Future, in 1999. These two arcade versions were subsequently squished together to make a PlayStation and Dreamcast port in the year 2000. I still can't get my head around how this got localized. I'll just assume it must have been a huge hit in the arcades. Yes, I'll repeat, while rare, this did get a release outside Japan. Get collecting. This is a technical fighter. Back when it came out, fighting games were becoming these 3-button simple input kind of games that anybody could button mash through, and it was putting fighting game aficionados off of going to the arcades and pumping in quarters. Too many filthy casuals, how dare they come muddy the floor of the arcades with their peasantry, and how dare they beat my meticulously practiced combos by just smashing buttons. But Capcom, they saved the day. Their JoJo fighter appealed because of its reasonably unheard of license outside Japan, its rather technical and complicated fighting system, and its extremely appealing manga aesthetic. The result is an arcade fighter that forgoes the search for accessibility at the time and instead embraced that it was a game for hardcore fighting game players, for the elite. There's a whole bunch of Stardust Crusaders' best characters to play as on the side of either Jotaro or Dio, with loads of sweet moves and combos. This game introduced a design for Midler, a character whose stand, the High Priestess, was fought in the original story. The new design was provided by Araki himself, and while stylistically off compared to the look of Stardust Crusaders characters, it's still in fitting with the world of JoJo. The console ports include Super Story, a large story mode with fights, minigames and cutscenes. Some sections take the form of quick-time events utilizing panels from the manga. One stage is played from a first-person perspective and has you shooting at the screen. When Polnareff and Kakyoin have to enter Joseph's head to fight lovers, the whole section is played as a shmup. I freaking love it. It's a really nice touch and not something Capcom had to do. They could have just ported the arcade game as is, but this is a super nice touch. It follows the whole continuity of Stardust Crusaders and made a great companion to the modern animated show while I was watching it. While it still takes some liberties with the story, it's nowhere near as mixed up and jumbled as the Super Famicom game. I'd also like to mention there was an Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network port, both of which were taken down because of licensing issues. I missed the chance to buy it back in the day, mainly due to having no interest in JoJo back then. But seeing as nobody holds the license anymore, I consider it abandonware. So I got a hold of it, didn't I? I have my means. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure HD feels kinda lacking after the PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast versions. The Super Story mode has been removed, and so has the gallery. What more, the HD visuals are just the arcade visuals upscaled with a cheap shader applied to the screen. Everything looks too clean, except for the game itself, which just draws attention to the overall lack of passion Capcom had, churning out these live arcade ports at the time. There's no way Capcom could justify $20 for this. It likely didn't sell too good, considering the price and the obscurity of the license. I'm glad Bandai Namco have the license now. They're knocking out hit after hit with All-Star Battle and Eyes of Heaven. Masterpieces. And I'm growing quite fond of these guys for their excellent work in Asia with English game releases. Nobody deserves that license more than they do. The PlayStation 2 saw 2 games based on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. One is a brawler that follows the entire plot of Part 1, and the other focuses on the story of Part 5. I promise to take a look at these two eventually, but for now, I'm all JoJo'd out. Tell you what, I promise to do them when the Part 5 anime is announced, which could be anywhere from 2 months to 2 years away. This has been Sushi Bites. Thanks for watching.